A fight over unsealing the Mar-a-Lago search affidavit. Was climate change blamed for childhood obesity? And the Inflation Reduction Act won't actually reduce inflation. That and more on this week's Headlines. To America Uncovered, I'm Chris Chappell. According to the Washington Post, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland called Trump's bluff by unsealing the search warrant used by the FBI to raid Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago. To keep this poker analogy going, Trump then raised the stakes by demanding the Justice Department unseal the affidavit that supported the search warrant. The DOJ folded, refusing to unseal these documents. They said it was because there remain compelling reasons, including to protect the integrity of an ongoing law enforcement investigation that implicates national security, that support keeping the affidavit sealed. So I guess Trump wins the hand. Maybe don't get into a poker match with a guy who literally runs casinos. So they raided a billionaire's lair, found a bunch of cool stuff, and now refuse to disclose anything. I think I know what's really going on here. Obviously, Trump is Batman. This isn't the news story we need, but the one we deserve. There are legitimate reasons to keep some of this information sealed, such as protecting witnesses and evidence. On Thursday, a federal judge said he may unseal part of the affidavit. He gave the Justice Department a week to propose redactions to the document. I guess we'll just have to wait a week for more information. It's not like anyone is going to leap to wild conclusions as to what might be in the affidavit. Just kidding. How would cable news survive without people speculating on whether Trump wanted to sell classified material to Russia or Saudi Arabia? And some falsely claimed Trump sent a fundraising email offering nuclear codes, which is ridiculous. Because Trump would never sell something that didn't have his name on it. If there's anything Trump is loyal to, it's his brand. Among the items the FBI seized were Trump's passports. They ultimately returned them, saying it was common practice for any suspect considered a flight risk. Trump wrote on Truth Social, "Wow, in the raid by the FBI of Mar-a-Lago, they stole my 3 passports, one expired, along with everything else. This is an assault on a political opponent at a level never seen before in our country." That's shocking. Mostly that Trump hasn't seen Hamilton. Duels were definitely a higher level of political assault on a political opponent. The Vice President of the United States shot and killed the U.S. Treasury Secretary. How is that not still news? Despite Trump's outrage over the Mar-a-Lago raid, it seems to be helping him politically. A poll among Republican primary voters showed this news boosted Trump from a 30 to 40-point lead over his nearest competition, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. This is because Trump is able to say he's the victim of yet another witch hunt. I'd say DeSantis should try to portray himself the victim of a witch hunt. But in Florida, witch hunting just sounds like a sport you do in the swamps. This raid is even helping the political aspirations of people endorsed by Trump. Fierce Trump critic Liz Cheney, a Republican, lost her House re-election bid in the Wyoming primary to Trump-endorsed Republican candidate Harriet Hagman. It seems like every time someone goes after Trump, it just winds up helping him. Forget Batman. I think Trump is Obi-Wan Kenobi. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. Meanwhile, current and former Trump allies Rudy Giuliani, Senator Lindsey Graham, and his legal advisor Jenna Ellis were all ordered to testify before a grand jury in Georgia investigating Trump's alleged attempts to change the results of the 2020 election. The grand jury's role is to determine whether there's enough evidence to pursue the case. Look, no one should be above the law, and the most powerful people need to face consequences for their actions as much as anyone. But it seems like every time anyone goes after Trump, it just makes him more powerful. At this point, if there's one more investigation into him, forget Batman or Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's going to turn into Dr. Manhattan. Or more accurately, Dr. Mar-a-Lago. More after the break. Welcome back. Children today are about 30% less aerobically fit than their parents were at the same age. And the culprit is climate change. Of course it is. And it's not just childhood obesity. Climate change should be blamed for everything. Why did I put on 15 pounds, not pay my taxes, and come home at 3 a.m. with lipstick on my collar? Obviously, it's climate change. While this may seem like a fringe theory that can be laughed off, it was actually shared by CBS.
It's a new study showing how climate change, specifically higher temperatures, is making our children more inactive and more obese.
Although even one host was a little dubious about the findings.
Now listen, it has been a lot hotter, and the weather has been crazy, but I think it also has to do with technology, you know?
Yeah.
It's one thing not to go outside, but these kids don't go outside because they can stay inside, be on their phones, play video games, and be social without having to go outside and be social.
Can't help but notice he didn't mention one big reason kids didn't go outside and be social as much the past 2 years is because, they weren't allowed to because of the COVID lockdowns. The CDC announced that teens, and especially young school-aged children, saw an alarming increase in their weight during the pandemic. Don't worry, kids. We all did. We all did. But a reporter for the right-leaning Washington Free Beacon pointed out CBS didn't even correctly interpret the study they shared, saying this seemed too insane even for left-wing climate scientists, so I read the study summary. The authors don't blame climate change for children getting fatter, but that fat children may have a harder time dealing with climate change because fat people don't do as well in the heat. But that reporter was wrong too because he only looked at the study abstract and not the full study. But CBS was even more wrong because we read the study. It does say that children are 30% less fit than their parents were. But that's not something this study found. They were just quoting other studies. And none of these studies said this 30% was because of climate change, CBS. Separately, the study also had a sentence that said that climate change can be a cause or a consequence of physical inactivity, especially in vulnerable populations like children. But again, this study was just quoting another study, one that didn't actually mention kids. By the way, the study CBS referenced actually did talk about how measures like the COVID lockdowns were a big barrier to physical activity. But that's because they said COVID is an example of the health effects of climate change. So CBS incorrectly interpreted a study, reported it, doubted what they reported, and posed an alternative cause to why children are gaining weight while ignoring an obvious reason that was mentioned in the study they reported on. How could they have screwed up so royally in every single step? Obviously, it has to be climate change. It's too hot to do proper research. Speaking of things affecting our health, COVID. Are you not that worried about it anymore? Well, apparently neither is the CDC. That's right, even the medical professionals are over it. The CDC no longer recommends social distancing, quarantining after being exposed to COVID-19, or testing when you have no symptoms, aka what most Floridians have been doing since April 2020. We ain't gonna let some pesky virus get in the way of our witch hunting. COVID is still out there, though. First Lady Jill Biden tested positive for COVID this week. It's a shame she got this. Now, if you got COVID a month ago, she could have blamed that for her breakfast taco comment being so tasteless. The CDC's new COVID guidelines upset many people who feel that they aren't following the science and are just doing this to get people back to work and kids back to schools. In light of this issue and several other issues, the CDC announced they'd be making big changes to the organization in an attempt to restore public trust. Which will be hard since a lot of people now distrust and question the CDC, aka what most Floridians have been doing since April 2020. Apparently Florida man is a time traveler, which doesn't give me much hope for the future. But here's some hope for the present. The FBI rescued over 200 sex trafficking victims, including 84 children. Wow, that's amazing. It's nice to hear some good news for a change. After a rescue so heroic, the FBI must be beloved and appreciated. And now the FBI is on high alert after receiving countless threats against them following their Mar-a-Lago raid. The FBI arrested a Pennsylvania man over death threats against agents. And a deadly standoff occurred when a man tried storming an FBI building in Cincinnati and fired a nail gun. Wait, So this guy planned a raid and instead of waiting for anyone to join him, just ran in while poorly equipped? By any chance, as he ran in, did he yell, "Leroy Jenkins"? And after the break, Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, but it may not actually reduce inflation. Welcome back. Inflation probably won't get better anytime soon. The Inflation Reduction Act has been signed into law, but some economists predict it won't actually do anything to lower inflation. A group of economists and data scientists at the University of Pennsylvania released an analysis that said the impact on inflation is statistically indistinguishable from zero. That's because a lot of the bill is about spending money on things like energy security and climate change. Other parts include hiring more IRS employees to collect taxes. And most of the price caps on prescription drugs won't take effect for years. The economists do say that the law will reduce the government deficit by $264 billion over 10 years, but that this will still have almost no effect on inflation. The Inflation Reduction Act doesn't reduce inflation. What next? Are you going to tell me that music television doesn't play any music? 17 states are urging the U.S. Postal Service to no longer buy gas-powered delivery vehicles, because that's exactly what the U.S. Postal Service needs right now. To lose even more money buying more expensive electric vehicles, potentially leading to staffing shortages and even more delays in delivery. At this point, we might as well go back to using carrier pigeons. They're environmentally friendly, and going pigeon is way less scary than going postal, unless you just washed your car. The push for electric mail trucks is due to environmental concerns, but a recent poll shows that fewer Americans today are worried about how they'll be affected by climate change than they were 3 years ago. While many are still concerned about climate change, especially considering an ongoing drought in Nevada and Arizona will force water restrictions on citizens for a second year in a row, it's hard to care as much about rising temperatures killing fish when the economy is so bad you're starving. In fact, dead fish would actually help out with that. It's probably a good thing for Biden that voters care less about the environment. Even though activists say Biden secured his climate legacy with the climate legislation attached to the Inflation Reduction Act, the act also reinstated the largest oil and gas lease in U.S. history. This will allow drilling in over 80 million acres across the Gulf of Mexico. So maybe clean those dead fish before you eat them. Wow, the Inflation Reduction Act really is just like MTV. Despite what it claims to do in its name, in reality, it's mostly just ridiculousness. One thing that will help the environment slightly is fewer airplane flights. American Airlines announced they cut 31,000 flights in November to better manage their resources. This is terrible news if you were looking forward to visiting your family for Thanksgiving. But amazing news if you weren't looking forward to visiting your family for Thanksgiving. Drats! I'm so sad I won't get to hear Uncle Frank and Cousin Becca argue for 9 hours straight over the midterm elections. Darn you, American Airlines! Speaking of endless political fights, social media. A study revealed that digital health companies, websites and apps that provide healthcare, are giving patient data to Facebook to help them with targeted advertising. Great, just what you need. To talk to an online doctor about where to receive chemotherapy, then suddenly have Facebook show you a bunch of ads for wigs. Even for Mark Zuckerberg, this is low. I'm not surprised he has no qualms about prying into other people's lives, though, especially since he looks like a grown-up version of the telepath 11 from Stranger Things. When confronted about this egregious abuse of privacy and possible HIPAA violations, these digital health companies have no excuse. Actually, that's not true. They have one excuse. It's climate change. So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Leave your comments below. And be sure to support America Uncovered by going to patreon.com/America Uncovered. Contribute $1 or more per episode. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Or join our exclusive censorship-free social media community on Locals. Check out AmericaUncovered.locals.com. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.